Welcome everyone, so this is my prediction for Jujutsu Kaisen chapter 254. I think this is one of the most unpredictable Jujutsu Kaisen chapters we've had in a very long time. And this is because of a few reasons. And there's a very big moment that happened in chapter 253 that was kind of disappointing to me. This was basically the Maki versus Sukuna chapter, or the Toji versus Sukuna, since we've always kind of wanted to see that fight. Bear in mind, this is a weakened Sukuna, so I've seen some people saying that he's above 15 finger level. Although if you look at some of the statements that were made during the Yuji and Yuta fight, it seems like he might be a lot weaker than 15 fingers. At least until the end of this chapter, where he might apparently have gone back to full power. And I'll explain what I mean by that in a minute. But it's quite possible and maybe likely that Sukuna is at full power again. So as we went through this chapter, they were talking about who is the strongest grade 1 sorcerer. Meimei immediately says that Kusakabe would be the strongest grade 1 sorcerer. And this is significant because I did a tier list a while back. I need to do an updated version of that since a lot of things have changed. But Meimei was incredibly strong. Her abilities are kind of busted and she seems just like an overall elite fighter. Especially when she's tag teaming with Ui. They kind of took down a special grade cursed spirit and they are only grade 1, so that is very, very impressive. And obviously Nanami is also a powerhouse, he's extremely strong. So they also asked Satoru Gojo who is the strongest grade 1 sorcerer. And Gojo also says it has to be Kusakabe. But he says that it's probably a different story if you include the big 3 families. And of course we know that the big 3 families would have had Naobito, who was known as the strongest grade 1 sorcerer. In fact, he had his own category called Supreme Grade 1 Sorcerer. And he was able to impress Dagon a little bit with his speed, but he really wouldn't have been able to do too much against Dagon, especially with the domain and everything. And we also had Naoya and a bunch of other guys who were pretty powerful. But this was still quite surprising. I didn't think Kusakabe was the strongest grade 1 apart from those other guys. I still think when Meimei and Ui are working together, they would probably take down any grade 1 sorcerer, apart from maybe Naobito. But I guess we're about to see how powerful Kusakabe really is. And interestingly, when they asked Kusakabe who is the strongest grade 1 sorcerer, my guy just straight up said someone other than me. And Usami? I have no idea who Usami is, to be honest. So we proceed to watch Maki fighting Sukuna, and they kind of have like a pretty cool fight. And it seems like Sukuna is largely just able to neutralize Maki's soul-splitting blade. And it's also tough for Maki since she doesn't have reverse curse technique. Kusakabe and Ino are also here trying to help Maki out, but it seems like Sukuna is kind of dealing with them comfortably. So we see Maki saying here that she has to end Sukuna right here and right now, before the fight drags on too long and Sukuna regains his abilities. And then the commentator says, Hajime Kashimo, Higoruma, Yuta Okotsu, following the death of Satoru Gojo, many that represented the peak of Jujutsu sorcery, stood before Sukuna baring their fangs at him. And yet it says that they amounted to nothing more than an appetizer for the beast. A beast who truly roused Sukuna's hunger. Maki Zenin. So this is Gege giving Maki a lot of props, which is kind of confusing considering how this fight ends and how quickly things end right here. And I have to say, this is the disappointing thing to me. I thought that surely Maki would do better and she wouldn't really just go down to one black flash. So I'm kind of hoping that in the next chapter we can see her just shrug it off. Yes, Black Flash is insanely powerful, and we saw that it was giving Sukuna a very tough time, but we've seen other characters in the past just survive Black Flash. In fact, Yuji had to spam Black Flash against Mahito many times. And it's also disappointing that a fight between Toji and a weakened Sukuna would end so quickly. Obviously I know it's not Toji, but Maki is basically on Toji's level, even though some people say she's not, but Gege literally said that they are the exact same power level. So I definitely expected a little more from Maki's character, especially since Sukuna kinda doesn't have his heart working right quite yet. And he took a lot of damage, lost a lot of output, and just over cursed energy. And it's just surprising to me that it would just end so quickly. But on the bright side, for sure Maki is going to survive that Black Flash. Even if he knocks her out and takes her out, at least Sukuna didn't cut her in half like he did Yuta or Gojo or even Higoruma. So my theory on Maki surviving against Sukuna would come true if it ended here. But at the same time, I would also have liked to see a bigger fight between Maki and Sukuna. But apparently, she's the one that Sukuna was excited to fight the most after Gojo's death. And this is because she abandoned all Jujutsu sorcery. And this is interesting because I always assumed that heavenly restriction is not really a new thing in the Jujutsu world. And considering that the Heian era was the golden age of Jujutsu, I expected that Sukuna had met other people who have had this heavenly restriction. But it seems not. Maybe this was his first experience against heavenly restriction. My goodness, wouldn't it be badass if Maki was just like 5 times stronger than she is now? So she's obviously still like an insane tank. But if you consider the reinforcement Sukuna has, Yuta and also Gojo, she's not that much physically stronger than those guys when they reinforce their own strength with cursed energy and all kinds of stuff. Even her speed is not that special because we kind of saw Sukuna blitz her in this chapter, where she almost couldn't react to Sukuna's speed, which is kind of ridiculous. So yeah, it would have been interesting if Maki was more powerful. After all, she does have this unique heavenly restriction. But obviously that would have had its own problems, like it would have made her stronger than Yuta and Hakari and all those other special grades, and would have made her almost to the level of guys like Sukuna and Gojo. She wouldn't be able to beat Gojo, obviously, because he has the infinity, which is basically impossible no matter how strong you are to get past if you don't have any kind of barrier technique, unless you're Toji and you have the inverted spear of heaven. It seems like Sukuna was oddly excited about this fight and he took it a little more seriously than usual. Because apparently to him, the outcome of this fight between him and Maki will prove which is better, giving up all Jujutsu abilities for heavenly restriction, kind of like what happens with Rock Lee in Naruto. Or is it better to just have this cursed energy or chakra? And this is basically what's at stake in this fight. But it's also not fair because obviously Maki would beat a regular Jujutsu sorcerer, but Sukuna is like as good as you can be as a Jujutsu sorcerer, so it's the peak of Jujutsu. But Maki is not necessarily the peak of physical strength. Cursed energy gives you universal abilities like infinity or even Sukuna's world-cutting slash, not to mention Yorozu's perfect sphere that has infinite pressure. And there's also the black hole by Yuki. So the answer to this question Sukuna is asking should be pretty clear. And of course you also get reverse curse technique if you're really good, and you basically become a zombie who can't be killed. So having cursed energy is obviously way better, and as you'll see here soon, you're also able to do Black Flash, which can one-shot someone who is supposed to be way physically stronger than you in theory. If Maki was like 5 times stronger, then it would have been a little more fair of a comparison, but as it stands, some of these Jujutsu abilities are just insanely broken. Correct me if I'm wrong, didn't Madara say the same thing when he was fighting Might Guy, when Guy opened the 8th gate of death? I feel like I remember Madara saying the same thing as Sukuna here. But which is better, cursed energy or just the peak of physical abilities? And the final thing Sukuna says is, "You're the only one who's ever forced a roll upon me." And I'm not quite sure what he means by this, but he proceeds to do a Black Flash, which is kind of insanely cool. We've seen a lot of people do Black Flashes, and this is the big moment of this chapter. We've all been wondering all this time, why hasn't Sukuna done Black Flash? And I've seen some theories, some people saying that maybe Sukuna can't do Black Flash for whatever reason. And Black Flash is an ability that apparently you can't really do at will, that sometimes it just comes and works and sometimes it doesn't. And Black Flash is also like just being in the zone or in the flow state. And we saw that immediately after Gojo did a Black Flash while he died, but before that he gained 120% of his cursed energy back and his reverse curse technique came back. I remember when Black Flash was introduced, I thought it was going to be just like this special ability of Yuji early in the series, but like the series will quickly outgrow it, even though its description was insane and it was like ridiculous. I'm like, really? That's the description of the ability? Like, why isn't it way more broken than that? So this is definitely one thing I give Gege credit on, because Black Flash has just remained an S tier ability from the beginning of the series all the way to almost the end right now. And we even saw Sukuna just get knocked out by Black Flash when Gojo was spamming those Black Flashes. So I guess it's kind of consistent that it could one-shot Maki if it was able to knock Sukuna clean out. So we get to the end of the chapter where the stuff we talked about in the beginning comes into play. Everyone has basically lost, and Kusakabe is seemingly the only one left to face Sukuna. And Kusakabe just unfortunately seems like the kind of guy who is targeted for this big death moment. And you can see him asking himself like, what the hell, like how am I the only one left? Where is Choso and Itadori? And yeah, obviously Meme is not just going to come into obvious suicide, and we obviously know that Yuji is going to heal and come out to face Sukuna. But the question is, does Gege want Kusakabe to survive or not? Because if Gege doesn't want Kusakabe to survive, Yuji is not going to make it. Yuji is gonna finish healing right after Sukuna destroys Kusakabe. And this is why it's so hard to predict what it's gonna be, because you have to know what Gege wants to do. So I think the fight between Kusakabe and Sukuna is going to have an unexpected outcome. Kusakabe looks like he's kind of set up to just lose kind of embarrassingly and probably die as well. I would actually predict the opposite. I think it's a little bit too obvious. And I think Gege is going for a twist here. Like, Kusakabe compared to Sukuna is almost comically weak. Like, imagine if someone who is on the level of Toji was just one-shotted by Sukuna without a heart. So what I think is gonna happen is Kusakabe is going to have some kind of unique ability that's gonna give Sukuna some trouble, or at least impress Sukuna. I feel like if he impresses Sukuna, he's more likely to die, to be honest. Because as a writer, it will look like he gave Kusakabe his flowers and his props before he died. But either way, my prediction is most likely Kusakabe is going to do something that is going to surprise Sukuna, but he's also going to survive, and I think he will survive by Yuji getting there just in the nick of time before things get really, really bad for him. Or even if he does get cut up badly, they're gonna pick him up and he's gonna go and get healed. And one thing I'm curious to see is, how is it gonna look when Yuji mixes his Black Flash with that Soul Fist that he has, and what kind of effect that's gonna have on Sukuna? I think that's going to be quite interesting. Kusakabe is going to get tossed around a little bit as Sukuna is playing with him, but he's not really going to finish him yet. And then Yuji and Choso will come and help Kusakabe. But also, I think Maki will get up at some point as well. Even though she doesn't have reverse curse technique, we know she can heal major wounds within like 5 minutes. I can definitely see her getting up soon, although not in time to save Kusakabe though. But yeah, that's my prediction for the next chapter. Drop a sub or a like if you enjoyed the video, and see you in the next one.